Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are going to talk about the class project, how to construct it, what are the contents of it, how you format it. All these kind of things, we are going to cover in this lecture. First of all, we need really to see what's the cover page has and the table of contents. Cover page and then the page after it, directly table of contents. The cover page, you should have a cover page contains the following: the university logo, professional one, project title, what is the name of that program, what the name of that project, project number, name and ID. And actually, before even the project title, I think you should have the department and the class name and number. All your documentation must have a standard logo of the original format, department name and the class name and number. Then on the second page, table of contents, محتويات, a professional one. Indentation, what is the major task? That's the first level. And the second level, what is the next or the subtask you are going to do in that project. Well, the first step, which is the group construction. First step of any project is building a group. Student will work in groups of 4 to 5 members, as we said early in the semester, in first week, in the week 1 and 2. For every project, members must assign a project manager, a coordinator actually, who coordinate the effort together. Project manager will divide the task. Actually, all of you divide the task together, because as we said, not really a project manager, because we don't want somebody really to act as a manager and the other, because everyone has the same interest in that project. Divide the task between the member based on their skills and experience. Any group must provide a report about each member activities in the project, such as meeting minutes, main role for every member. I think you should really explain for each member what task really he accomplished. It is not necessarily that all members got the same mark. The mark will be assigned based on the work for every member and the overall knowledge of the documentation and actually the way he or she present their work. Then we move on to the phase 1, which it is the next step in the whole project, is choosing the software project. We have to select, identify, and select what really we are going to do. And as we said, the first phase of the system development lifecycle, it is identification and selection. And your project will provide a full documentation for the project you choose. The best project is an application you know about, or you know somebody who knows about it. In the first phase, there are many activities. You should have, first of all, the following. First thing, actually, even before the scope, it is introduction. Introduction of the project. What is the environment of the project? What is the problem definition of the project? What is the environment which caused us to do the project? And actually here, well, since it is a class project, well, because in order to pass the class, we have to have, a project. But in the real life, I think you have to find out, to justify, to explain what is the project, what is the circumstances, وما هي الظروف التي أدت إلى ولود هذا البروجكت. Then after that, we have to come up with the scope. the boundaries. We have to find out exactly what we are going to do with this project. We have to find, who are the stakeholder, what is the external entity which is they are dealing with the context diagram, because we have to represent the scope in a context diagram. Context diagram is the name of the project in a square or circle, and the external entity around it, the people who's going to interact with it, which it is most of them really the stakeholders. Well, phase one, after we find out the scope, actually either when we find what really we are going to do through the scope context diagram, I think we could really find out, what methodology we are going to use. Well, in the software, in the system analysis project, we have no choice but following the system development lifecycle, the methodology. And we have to find out, what process model we are going to use. Are we going to use it incremental, or are we going to use it waterfall, etc. Then, since we find out that what really the scope, what is the size of the project, how big is that project is, what's in the project and what's not in, we could find out, the risk. The risk, the project risk here we talk about, because the risk, it have many different categories. We talk about project risk, organization risk, etc. Here, the risk really we care about a student or a class project. It is the project risk, which is probably it will be an obstacle from finishing the project, which it is constraint and the project, which is probably stopping you from finishing the project on time, within budget, and as specified. Then after that, we have to find that feasibility study, and we could do really the risk and the feasibility concurrently. Feasibility, there are many different categories, as we really discussed in chapter 5. There are financial, schedule, technical, operational, and political, all these kind of feasibility. Well, for a class, a project, I believe the two categories which it's really applicable here is the schedule feasibility and the technical feasibility. Are we technical able and capable of doing the project? And do we have the schedule? Do we have the time really to finish the project and that schedule? Then we have to put a timetable after do some rough estimation for the task we are going to do, and the dependencies between these tasks, which task is done first and what tasks are done concurrently, etc. And we have to build the Gantt chart. The Gantt chart, the way it's supposed to be done, we go to the internet, we download. There are many applications. It helps you in construct a Gantt chart. So we pull one of these, download it, change the reconfigure it, that application if it is really applicable. We could change the holidays, we could change the weekends, whatever, because the weekend and the holidays represent the holidays and weekend of the originator, which it is usually from the West. So we download it, and then we go and we create a timetable, task we are going to accomplish, duration, how much really each task is going to take, and dependencies. And then after that, we go and plug it in the Gantt chart, and at the end we find, from the Gantt chart, what is the critical path, if there is any slack time, whatever, and we put it part of our document. Well, by now we cover the first phase, which it is the planning phase. We're going now to the analysis phase. Analysis phase, first of all, we have to find out, technique, or what techniques we are going to use in order to elicit requirement, in order to gather, to determine, to collect requirements. and then categorize the output of this requirement with functional and non-functional requirement. The techniques, whatever technique we are going to use or techniques, I think we have to document it. If we have, an interview, this means we have to come up with a page of some question we ask in the interview. Then we come up with a functional and non-functional requirement. We put them, as part of our document. A context diagram represents the scope of your project, showing the external entities. Then we take the context diagram and plug it in again in the face, this face. Why? Because it is a starting point here in order to exploit it. So we have the context diagram of our project. Process modeling. We start process modeling, which it has to represent the data flow diagrams, level 0, level 1, level 2 if possible, etc. This means we have to go take context diagram and explode it, drill down through it, decompose it to level 0, first of all, which should represent the external entity, the major entity, not the external, the major entity of that system, which it is like if it is a system, the subsystem, it's gonna be showing in the level 0. And then we take each subsystem, if it is explodable, and make level 1 of these. It's like if it is subsystem there, probably it will represent a module there. Then we'll go to level 1, and every entity in level 1, if it is explodable, we go through it in level 2, etc. Actually here, for a class project, we don't want to really go in detail. I think it's enough that we know what is really the context diagram and those level 1 or 2, and we could really probably take, one entity and make level 1 of it. And if it is applicable, probably we take one entity from level 1 and we make level 2. Well, after we reach the N level, the lowest level of DFD, which it is going to represent the function, the program we are going to construct, we are going to write. So we'll go to one of these programs and do the logic modeling, the algorithm inside, the logic inside that program. Logic modeling here, we have 3 different things. We have a decision table, decision tree, and pseudocode. Logic modeling using decision table, and decision tree and pseudocode for 2 of these processes. Not for 1, for 2 of them. We could probably take a process and do a decision table and decision tree to it and a pseudocode. And then we take another process and we do again a decision table or decision tree. This is if it's applicable. Probably you take one process and you have a decision table to it because it has a compound condition, and probably another process which it is really you could construct a decision tree. Then after that, after the logic modeling, we go to the data conceptual modeling, which we'll go and represent the entity relationship diagram, ERD. We should show all the entities and relationship between them, show the attribute, and build a schema for each table. Actually, the schema, it is really part of the design. Here, it is really the last sentence here, it is part of the design, which it comes in phase 3. But don't make it cluttered. ما تخليوش معجق كثير. Just put the entities, and probably the bubbles comes from each entity. It has just probably the primary key and probably 1 or 2. One, I think it's more than enough. 1 attribute. Well, phase 3 is the design phase. Design phase, we should cover 2 different things here. The ERD we construct in the previous phase, we'll take it and we normalize the relation. We build the schema. when we normalize it, we go there and move it from 1NF to a 2NF and a 3NF. Then interface design, we have an interface for a screen, report, or both. And I think we should really follow the guidelines we are going to use in the chapter of interface design. Then after that, we go to the implementation. Since we are not going to write the programs and test it, whatever, but we're gonna assume that we are going to test it. We are going to write the program. The assumption that we are going to write the program, but we are not gonna. But if we write the program, what type of test we are going to do? What kind of test cases? So you have to supply or to put another 5 to 10 test cases you will perform if really you are writing the program. And by that time, phase 3 will be complete. But in general, after phase 3, which is the design is done, at the end, I think you should have a glossary, which it is, the major key term there, and what do they mean, if there is like acronym, if you use some acronym there, and what's really they stand for. Appendices or appendix, if there is appendix or 2, which it is, I doubt that there is. And then the last thing, it is an index. An index, you choose how many key term and in what page that key term exists. A word, a key term, or task, or whatever it is. That's in case, if somebody really reading your document and find out, some word, task, process, key term, whatever, and he want to find out what is it, where it occurs, then you go to the index at the last thing, and then find out where is that key term happens or occurs in your document. Well, there are some general guidelines here. Project member must set up the standard design for each type of the documentation to maintain the consistency of the whole documentation. We have to have really like a template-like or a standard, or you can search on the internet and find creative tools to produce your documentation and sample of your project on the internet. I mean, if you could look at really a sample in the internet and try to get some ideas from it, you could go to the internet and download the program for Gantt chart, as we said. You must apply a table of contents, which it is, as we said earlier, in the first slide. The table of contents, it is very, very important with the major task and the subtask, as we did explain it. Glossaries, it's very important. Appendices, it doesn't have to be, because appendix, we said it is something relevant to the subject we talk about, but it is not essential. That is, why we really talking about appendix. I mean, if you see appendix in a book or in a document, whatever, that is what really the appendix all about. And index for your documentation, where applicable. Please apply the English language standards in writing your documentation. Well, the final project, you must provide all documentation printed on paper for all 3 phases and provide the following information, we're talking about. But actually, well, it depends on the environment of the coronavirus circumstances and how really we're gonna finish this semester, and we'll let you know about it, what is going on. The grading policy or the grading of the project, the grading of your project will be based on number of criteria. Project organization from the table of contents, how you organize your. So I could really look at the table of contents. I found really if your project is really organized the right way, because that was in the document. In our case here, when technical document, the sequential activity or the sequence of the activity is the most important things in the document. We should find out that which one we're gonna do first, then what we're gonna go doing next, what activity we could do really actually concurrently, what is the previous activity it has to be done before I could start this activity. We should really find out, what activity of the analysis, what activity of design. I don't want you to go and put the ERD as a design. ERD is part of the analysis. The design, it is the schema of the database. I don't want you to put the use case as design. The use case, as we always talk about, it is a scenario-based technique. So we could use it really as a technique. We collect requirement, and we could really put it again in the analysis phase. Contents quality, it has to have some quality. Lay out your page. The page number, it's a must in order to put it in the index. Formatting. I don't want you to see, I don't want to see, a header is the last thing in the page, just the header sitting there, and the contents of the header in the next page. This is no good. Visual design, the design for if there is a table, if there is a diagram, whatever. Production and print quality. This is very important also. All these really has some marks. They play really we want to be a professional. I don't want to say, well, I don't know how really the words work, or PowerPoint, or whatever. Appropriate use of language. Finally, the project presentation. That's again, it depends on the circumstances, the environment, what's going on with this semester, with coronavirus era. Each team is required to make a 10 to 15 minutes presentation of the project. Presentation should be prepared using PowerPoint. You must apply the presentation skill effectively, because again, the presentation, it has some marks. You must use time management in your presentation. When we say 10 to 15, it should not exceed the 15 minutes. All team members must be present at their time slot of discussion. By this, we end the project. But at the final, hopefully, there will be a final this semester. We are going to, if you go and abstract these 12 slides and take the important thing, the technical things on, you abstract them to 100 or 125 words, there will be a question in the final in 120 words or less. What really you need, what activity you take, what process you do, what phase you follow in order to create a state-of-the-art project. And that one, it has 6 to 7 points out of 40 in the final. So if you do your project right, if you follow these steps, and you could abstract them in 100 words, then you could have 6-7 points plus 25, 32. This means 1/3 of the mark of that class. It is really in the project. Good luck to you all, and see you.